Hello, everyone. GM. This is your host for tonight, Arthur, and we have here also Chel Render, one of the co-founders of the DeFi community. So we are glad that you are here with us tonight, and we will be discussing another episode of DDC On-Demand, where we will be exploring another exciting and unique project in the blockchain ecosystem. So before that, the Davao DeFi community is gives emphasis to the education rather than on financial advice. So we are encouraging you to do your own research and practice due diligence when it comes to participating to different projects here in the ecosystem. And of course, our topic tonight will be about the Archway. It's a layer 1 blockchain, and we are calling this the value capture chain. And one of the our featured guests tonight will be helping us to explore what Archway is. So, yep. Of course, we have here head of the business development for Phi Labs, and of course, a core contributor to Archway, Max Mackendy. Max, welcome to the show, and thank you for having your time.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. Yeah, excited to kind of talk about what we're doing at Archway and kind of fill you guys in on really what kind of value we're trying to drive to the network and what applications are kind of coming on board currently.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. As an opening salvo, can you share to us your background, basically your journey up to the Archway? You started to crypto and then to Archway. Yep.
Yeah, no, happy to. And honestly, it's a bit of a non-traditional, I guess, background as it relates to getting into crypto. So I actually my background's in traditional finance. So I went to school for accounting, got my master's in accounting, and even worked the first 6-7 years of my career in the accounting and finance field. The whole time I was in the finance field, I kind of kept my ear to the ground on what was happening in the blockchain space. I would say I got interested in blockchain probably close to 2012, 2013. So very early on, I would say. I was introduced to Bitcoin. Unfortunately, couldn't really afford to hold much at that time, but I was aware of it and kind of starting to learn what Bitcoin was, what this idea of a distributed ledger was. And that was kind of my intro into, I'd say, the blockchain and Web3 world. So kind of paid attention to that. And what really piqued my interest was probably closer to 2017 when Ethereum came out with the idea of smart contracts. That really was what opened my eyes to what blockchains could actually be beyond just something like Bitcoin, which is more, of a payment layer or like a data storage, I'd say, versus something like smart contracts, where you can build real applications with what I would say real world uses. And not that Bitcoin doesn't, I would just say more traditional use cases for applications that we're used to. So Ethereum kind of was my foray into the crypto space, but then quickly realized I was kind of priced out on Ethereum. Gas was very expensive. I didn't have very much Ethereum to move around. So to me, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. So I was looking for alternatives, and that kind of led me to the Cosmos space. I kind of remember reading that white paper and understanding the idea of IBC and horizontal scalability. that made a ton of sense to me. So kind of spent the next couple of years researching the Cosmos SDK, different consensus mechanisms, which ultimately led me to Archway. So yeah, that's kind of my long-winded way of how I got into crypto. Started off in finance and just kind of an interest, and over time developed into what I'd call an obsession, to the point where I am now full-time working
Yeah,
on a layer one blockchain called Archway. So super exciting.
yeah, yeah. That's actually a great journey you have here. So we can consider you OG in the ecosystem, right? In the
I
industry.
like to think so. I've been around for a while. Seems
Yeah,
like forever.
yeah, nice. Well, okay, so let's dig down into the Archway discussion. So, can you introduce to us what Archway is, why it is unique, and maybe what is the project is all about?
Yeah. So it's at a high level, Archway is a general layer one blockchain. So it's a smart contract platform where you can build applications or tooling on top of. It's essentially the core infrastructure that a developer would build on top of if they want to build out a DeFi app or an NFT project. Um, and what I guess makes it unique is we use the Cosmos SDK and Tendermint
Mm-hmm.
as our consensus mechanism. So meaning that basically we use Rust that compiles down to Cosmosm as um, our language for developing on top of Archway. So if you're familiar with Cosmosm or many of these other IBC chains like Atom, Osmosis, some of these other more popular ones like Stargaze, they're also using the same programming language. So they're using Rust that compiles down to Cosmosm. So in that sense, Archway is very similar to a lot of the other layer ones in the Cosmos. But where I think Archway specifically differs is that they're focused on creating a sustainable economic platform from like the layer one perspective. So creating healthy inflation with counter inflationary mechanisms to make sure that you're not diluting the supply or becoming over inflationary like some high inflationary chains have in the
Mm-hmm.
past, which we've seen has not been great for the holders. But really what we're trying to do is get more value to be captured by the people who are actually bringing that value on chain. So Archway was designed in a way where it incentivized developers who actually get traction and bring actual activity and value on chain. So if you build a smart contract and it's being utilized, that developer will earn from that directly.
Mm-hmm.
So they do that in a couple of different ways. So they have one what's called a fee split. So every time someone utilizes your app or contract, you're going to get half of the gas fees. But what Archway also does that I think is very unique is that a portion of the inflation each block actually goes to the developers as well. So I think most people understand proof of stake. It's you stake your tokens and you earn a yield from the staking rewards from the inflation. And that's
Mm-hmm.
incentivized security. And that's why you stake your tokens. But Archway kind of takes the stance that we understand that's super important. We do value security. But if you don't have any on-chain activity or TVL or users, there's really nothing to secure. So that's why we've kind of taken the approach of subsidizing the application layer by taking a piece of the inflation, about 25% each block, and actually giving it directly back to the developers based
Mm-hmm.
on how much traction they've gained or how much, I guess, gas was consumed that block on their smart contracts. So in a way, we're really trying to align the developer with the layer one so that they're earning directly from what they're bringing on chain, as opposed to most models where it's really that the developer will indirectly earn from the layer one by taking a small piece of the fees, whereas we think they should take a much larger piece of the value flowing through the chain.
Yeah, that's actually a great alignment to the to what for the when it comes to incentivizing those who are really contributing to the growth of the ecosystem, and that's really nice. Um, so maybe we can discuss like the blockchain ecosystem is currently like stymied or having a challenge or in shackle when it comes to mass adoption. Do you think this Archway, the use case uh, that Archway is bringing could be the catalyst for mass adoption? Do you think? Well, what,
Yeah, I mean, I think it can certainly contribute to it because I do think there is a lack of places for people to build and earn pretty like directly from what they've built. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times teams need either grants or some sort of funding to be able to build up even an MVP to earn from. Where I
Mm-hmm.
think with Archway, it gives you the ability to basically just deploy a contract and immediately earn from its use. If there's demand, then you'll earn from it. So to me, that is a way to help get more developers on board, which will inherently create more applications, which is ultimately what will drive mass adoption, right? I think that's a big
Mm-hmm.
piece of it is people will come for applications, not necessarily a blockchain. We see it with our applications on our phone. People aren't going to buy necessarily a specific phone just because that has one application, right? But if you have access to all these applications on all these different phones, then people are going to
Mm-hmm.
really just use the application. That's what they're going for. And I think that applies to blockchains. Like you have to have a really good killer app if you want to bring someone over. Otherwise, they're not going to really care what blockchain they're using.
Yep.
So I think empowering the application layer inherently will help with adoption, but I think there's bigger issues before we can really get mass adoption across the wider Web3 space. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
related to onboarding new users and really just teaching new users how to utilize products in Web3. I don't think it's inherently easy to understand, and that's someone who's been in the space for quite a while. When I go to show a friend or family member how to get tokens or how to utilize an application, it is very rarely an easy experience to explain, even for myself. So
Yeah.
I would say that's the biggest hurdle that's kind of preventing adoption. And certainly think Archway is working towards creating that user experience that's easier and more user friendly. But I think that's a broader issue that we all need to kind of address in as the wider Web3 space.
Yeah. And I think Archway is also on that direction where you are supporting communities like Dawa DeFi community for the education of the people. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for that. Um,
Sure.
let's dig about the Cosmos ecosystem, or why you are launching in Cosmos ecosystem. And I think that's one of the advantage of Archway launching in ecosystem. Can you explore that a bit for us?
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it kind of relates to what I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
When I was doing my research really on the different platforms, the different consensus mechanisms, blockchains, architectures, all of that, it really just boiled down to what makes the most sense for like the future, right? I
Mm-hmm.
know it from Archway's perspective, we have a very long term approach to how we're building out the entire chain from the economic model to how we're approaching go to market.
Mm-hmm.
We're fully expecting this chain to be around in 5 to 10 years, right? So we're planning for that. Um, and so that's I think a big piece of what people don't do is they really plan for the long term. And so that's I know that's something that we've had to do a lot of thinking about is how do we position ourselves for that. And actually kind of lost track of your original question, but I know it's going to tie into the longevity.
Yeah, yeah. How about I see maybe last week or 2 weeks ago that you are
Hmm.
also partnering with Solana. Um,
Actually, but
yeah,
just one second, I do want to bring it back to what I was saying because I kind of remembered.
yeah.
It was about
Okay.
choosing the cosmos. It was about choosing the cosmos, and I just wanted to
Yes, yes.
mention with the longevity, it was deciding on an architecture that made sense for the long term. Is what I was trying to get to. And with the
Mm-hmm.
SDK, we feel like that is the future of where we're going, mainly because of a couple of things. We think one, the WASM and using Cosmosm is very flexible and allows us to utilize Rust, which gives application developers one, it gives us a large pool of developers to go after, but also it gives them the developers themselves a lot of flexibility in what they're building on their applications that I think certain languages like Solidity can't, or it can't give you the same amount
Mm-hmm.
of reliability as something like WASM. So that's one piece of it. And two is like throughput. As we scale, we need to have high throughput chains so that we can really, handle the mass adoption that would come with getting the adoption we'd hope with this space. But I think you need to have this idea of IBC and horizontal scaling as well. I don't think
Mm.
it's going to boil down to one blockchain ruling them all. I think there's going to be a ton of individual sovereign
So,
blockchains that are communicating via IBC or some other interoperability protocol. And so when we were building out Archway and thinking about the long term and how this entire space is going to scale and grow, we just think that the Cosmos is positioned very well with both IBC and the idea of having your own sovereign chain. So that's really like the core as to why we decided to be in the Cosmos. And then now as we've launched, you kind of see that there is this group of Cosmos chains that's kind of on the come up, and it's also nice to be part of that kind of narrative. But that just kind of happens to be, I guess, like a byproduct of the fact that we chose the SDK, but it wasn't necessarily the reason for it.
yeah. So I also think that interoperability is necessary for a blockchain to really scale.
Yeah.
And yep, like it would come a time that the ordinary users will be using blockchain, but they don't really know that they are actually using blockchain. So that's how, yeah.
And that's
So
and that's the
and then
goal, right?
yeah,
That's the end goal. So to get it to the point where the user is interacting with an application, but they're kind of unaware of what blockchain they're on because it's irrelevant to the user most of the time. They just
yeah,
want to use the application and have it really do whatever it's intended to do. And anything that happens in the background should really stay in
hmm,
the background, just like it is for a normal Web2 user. If you're using an application on your iPhone, you're typically not too concerned about what iOS you're on. You're really just trying to use your app on your phone. And
yeah,
that's where I think Archway kind of is a similar. You can think about it similarly. Archway is like that iOS on your iPhone, but really what people care about are those applications that people are building on top of it.
yeah, yeah. Correct. And indeed, it's a great what you call the direction that the ecosystem is going on. Now, let's discuss about the updates on Archway, or where is Archway at the moment when it in terms of growth and of course stages of releases. Yep, can you expand on that one?
Yeah. So we recently put out like a protocol update in general to really just to add some more features and to update some things like adding a fee burn so that when transactions are happening on chain, Arch is also being burned as well per block.
Mm-hmm.
That's all to make sure that um, really our economy of Archway is working properly, and that we have this mechanism for that when blocks are full, more arches burned than emitted, so that you kind of create this deflationary schedule for the circulating supply. But that's going to happen over time. It really takes full blocks to create that deflationary schedule. But now we have the ability to implement that now, and it is implemented so that this happens automatically on chain every time a transaction is submitted. But some other major upgrades I think that people can keep an eye out for will be we're just upgraded to SDK 47, and we'll be looking into upgrading to SDK 50. That's going to take a little bit of time for our engineering and technical teams to
Mm-hmm.
review that upgrade and make sure that there's nothing that we would find um, could subject us to any vulnerabilities or anything like that. So it'll be a little bit before we make that next upgrade. But I know the upgrade to SDK 50 will allow us to do a lot of cool things with ICA and the interchain account side of things. So looking forward to how Archway can take advantage of that. But in terms of how we're actually just doing some internal things, or I should say like community things to engage more users and get more people aware of what we're doing, is we're going to be doing some user campaigns that will really like reward users for doing on-chain activity. So we're going to be unveiling this platform on top of Archway Connect, which is our main platform for users to go to stake, swap, find the
Uh-huh.
ecosystem, what have you, and that's connect.archway.io. But we're going to be adding like an airdrop page there, and there's going to be daily tasks and other activities you can do as a user to really qualify yourself for future Archway airdrops, but then also airdrops from other applications. So this will be a good way to get users activated in the ecosystem, checking out the different apps and really taking them through the user flow on these applications. So that way that the developers who are building get more exposure to their apps. They start to get more users utilizing them, and they can start to build up, that user base and start to earn from what they've put on chain. So this will be a great way to align both the developers with the users and just the overall protocol. And we're going to be calling that Drop Camp. So pretty excited about that, and we'll be unveiling that whole campaign soon and dashboard. So keep an eye out.
Yeah. Yeah, I
But
think
yeah,
the community is also excited for that one. Hearing this one, I think that they will be very and they are anticipating for the unveiling of that application. And I think it's also necessary, of course, for user adoption, because it will also, I think, help uh, due to the fact that incentivization like this is actually talent magnets, like
yeah,
skill sets with those the tasking that they are with incentivization. I think that would actually um, help
yeah.
people to and give people an extra push to
Which I think they
provide
need. There's so many
yeah.
things happening in this space all the time. There's so many new chains and new kind of concepts always happening around here that if you don't have incentivization, it's really hard to get someone's attention. So
Yeah.
even if you have a really good product, a really good team, without incentivizing a user, it may be difficult to get them to actually come and try that product. But once they do, they might be a sticky user and want to come back and continuously use it. So
Mhm.
we definitely understand that it does take a bit of incentive, and we're willing to do that to get people onto the network and using these apps, because we have the feeling internally that once you utilize Archway, you'll feel the smoothness of the network, the
Mhm.
reliability that you get with it, and that's something you don't get with a lot of chains. So the more users we can at least expose to the network, I think the more users we can get on board. It's just getting them on board and getting them over that initial hurdle that
Mhm.
is sometimes quite difficult. But we're working with teams in the ecosystem to see how we can to help boost that, right? Doing things like
Mhm.
working with Galaxy to see if we can get any sort of on-chain campaigns to really boost user activity. Even doing things like we have an NFT marketplace launching soon called Amber,
Amber,
and it'll
yeah.
be Amber, and it'll be launching with Archie's as the first collection, and we're hoping that will also help to build community and get people more involved and kind of spread the word about Archway. So Archie's will be kind of utilized to help educate people and introduce them to the ecosystem. So I think there's a lot of initiatives we have in the pipeline that we've been working on to address just that, right? Like, how do you get users incentivized to come over and do stuff on chain? Because ultimately, that's what drives value to the layer one. At least that's how Archway sees it. So, or at least that's my opinion of how Archway sees it. I can't speak for the entire community. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
understand. Yep. How about the latest activities in the ecosystem, like the gas reduction, of course, the launching of Archie's dynamic NFT, and of course the Astrovault TGA. Can you share on that one?
yeah, no, you hit on a couple of great topics. I would say the two main ones I'd probably want to touch on is the gas reduction and the Astrovault airdrop NTG. So one thing I think we heard loud and clear from the community, and I think many probably heard it as well, was that there was this sentiment that gas felt a little high on Archway,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was the cost of gas or it was like the unit kind of bias of having to spend 3 or 4 Arch to submit a transaction. So what's cool about Archway and really about like Cosmos in general is that a lot of these parameters are governable, right? So you can
Mm-hmm.
vote on them
Yeah.
and change them. So with Archway specifically, we have a parameter called minimum price of gas, and that's essentially the floor or the least amount you can pay to submit a transaction on chain. And the purpose of this floor was to set a minimum amount of gas that could be considered significant to a developer, since they are splitting half the gas every transaction. We wanted it to be at a level where when a user submitted a transaction, the developer would actually earn a decent amount of Arch from that transaction. So to do that, we set a fairly high minimum gas price. But
Mm-hmm.
based on user feedback and from those using it, we basically found out that it seemed it might have been a little high, and to the point it may have even been discouraging users from doing on-chain activity. So again, what's cool about the Cosmos is this was voiced in different governance forums, and we basically addressed it with the community. And one of the teams, Gelato, actually put up the prop themselves to lower the minimum price of gas. And as far as I can tell, that is going to pass, and it may have already passed by now. But yeah, assuming that does pass, it will lower gas and Archway by about 6 to 7 magnitudes, making it a lot cheaper to submit transactions and do more complicated swaps like on Astrovault. So we're hoping this will spur a lot more user activity, and it's cool to see the community getting involved and being passionate about like changing a core parameter like that to really optimize the network to how they want to see it. It's rare that you see this type of coordination from the community. So we were excited to see them kind of step up and submit the prop, start the conversation, and really get things rolling. And now we're probably going to have to roll out the next version of Archway with the lower gas. And like I said, hopefully that spurs a ton more activity on chain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. With the lower gas, maybe for now it won't be much of an incentives for the developers, but if we see it in the long run, having the idea of mass adoption, I think that would be a great, that would be massive on their end, right?
Yeah.
And
And it can always,
how about the TGA? Okay, go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh, and just one more thing, I guess, to the gas, it can always be increased. So if it does appear that's too low, or developers feel they're not earning enough per transaction, it can always go back on chain and be increased. And that's something I think is really cool. That this isn't permanent. It's just, we're trying to find that middle ground and optimize for what suits the network best, and hopefully we'll find that soon. But to your other question, I know you mentioned the TGE with Astrovault. So that one is a really cool event for us. That was the first token that was launched on top of Archway by an application. So we had like Liquid Finance, and they have their staked version of Arch, but AXV was the first true standalone token that was issued on top of Archway. So AXV was airdropped to both users of Astrovault, anyone who LP'd or was swapping or using their AMM, as well as Jackal stakers. And the reason they were able to do Jackal stakers was because of a deal that the Jackal Foundation had worked out, where they provided a lot of liquidity to Astrovault and received a large portion of the airdrop. But they ultimately chose to redirect that airdrop to their stakers rather than the foundation taking it. So that's the reason why Jackal was included in that initial airdrop. But Archway stakers will also be included in the Astrovault airdrop too. So if you're staking Arch right now, you can expect to see some updates in probably the next couple of weeks with timing and snapshot dates. But you will be receiving a AXV airdrop coming up here, and that dashboard I spoke to earlier will likely be where you'll claim that, or at least see it. So keep an eye out for that. But there is one confirmed airdrop already. And hopefully there'll be a lot more as applications continue to deploy on Archway. We expect there'll be a lot more looking to issue a token as well, and ideally stakers of Archway will be included in those. But if not, it's still a great way to qualify, or at least prepare for those, would be to check out that dashboard once it goes live, and that will make sure that you have the best chance of qualifying for any future airdrops.
Wow. Yeah, that's great alpha for us. Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Max. Well, let's go about the onboarding of people into the Web3. So maybe you can expand a bit of at the current state of the Web3 developers, numbers of them, their numbers who are active, the current status, as well as if ever those Web2 developers going into the ecosystem. So what can we expect for that one, and what are the things that Archway is doing for the onboarding?
So as to the numbers, I can't really speak to that because I actually don't have great insight into the developer numbers. But what I can say is that there seems to be a resurgence of developers looking to build in the Cosmos. Just from my time here, and this is more anecdotal, but I feel like I've definitely had an uptick in people reaching out to me directly, asking if there's things that we could work on, or if there's anything specifically the Archway ecosystem needs. So that's
Mhm.
really encouraging to see, is just more developers kind of, reaching out on their own and not having to go out and actually find developers to come build. That's quite different than it was, I'd say, even 6 months ago. So that's encouraging. But another thing I think what Archer is trying to do specifically is educate developers and then onboard them in a way that's, I guess, a little bit more interactive and removes some of the barriers of getting onboarded. So one thing we did was Area 52, and this is kind of something that we've taken a step back on as we focused on some other key things that we had to get live on chain. But Area 52 is an interactive kind of training and learning application for building smart contracts in Rust and Cosmosm and deploying them on the SDK. So we utilize that quite a bit early on to get new users and new developers at least familiar with how to build on top of Archway. It had a lot of success. The only issue was we just had to kind of refocus our limited resources on other projects and other really important kind of infrastructure type items that came along with launch. So now that we're getting a little bit, I guess, into the swing of things with being live, I think we're trying to kind of go back and refocus on things like Area 52 to get developers more ways of learning and onboarded to the ecosystem. Another thing we're doing is really keeping up with our documentation. So if you were to check out docs.archway.io, one of the big things we're working on is providing really good documentation for new developers, not only for Archway, but really to onboard them to Tendermint, to Cosmosm, the SDK, and then ultimately how to build on top of Archway as well. So we're working to get more, tutorials, examples, templates, things like that included on our docs, so that any developer from really any ecosystem could start on Archway and figure their way out of really anything they want to build and onto any chain in the SDK. But hopefully they'll stick to Archway based on our incentive mechanism and the tools we provide.
Yeah. Okay. That's great news. How about the roadmaps and of course the future innovations in Archway? Maybe you can give us a general vision or a general picture of where Archway is heading in the future.
Yeah, well, we're working on I guess an external roadmap, because I think it'd be nice to kind of be able to action, because it's routed through Archway as this execution layer, and then through ICA it can do any sort of message passing or callbacks to execute that on whatever app chain you need. And to me, that creates a really cool flywheel for Archway, but also for developers. Like I said, where they host their core smart contracts on Archway, and we just utilize the tools we have with ICA to execute anything you want across the interchain. And then you're going to basically earn from every transaction due to that smart contract initiating on Archway. So I think that will be a really cool use case for Archway. And that's the end vision, right? Is where Archway becomes more of the background, where smart contracts are executed. And then you can use really